Before talking about the chainsaw attachment for the angle grinder, let me talk to you a few things about the angle grinder in general. It's important that you have a listen to this because it's a matter of safety and the safe handling of the machine itself. An angle grinder is one of the versatile tools one can have in the workshop. It can be used to cut, sand, grind, and when it comes to cutting, it can cut metal, wood, ceramic, glass, or even rock if you have the right kind of blades. And you can simply swap the blades. All you have to do is open this flange nut. There's a key available with the angle grinder. You can open this flange nut, you can swap the blades and get going. Like with any other power tool, it's important that you follow proper safety procedures. It is advised that you always have this guard that comes along with this angle grinder. I've removed the guard, but I do wear safety gears when I am working with one of these guys. There are so many different blades and attachments by which you can accomplish whatever task you want to, and it's a long list. But then for the context of this video, I'm going to give you an example using two different blades. This blade here is a metal cutting disc. Now, if something goes wrong, if the metal is going to pinch the blade is going to break. Of course, it is going to fling those parts on your face, but then it will be less dangerous compared to using these kind of blades. These kind of blades are used for cutting wood, which is definitely not advisable. Now, these blades are not going to break, and if the wood is going to pinch on the angle grinder, it is going to be disastrous, especially on those models which does not have a proper triggering mechanism. The angle grinder that I'm using has got only a switch, so by the time my hand reaches the switch, it is going to be too late. The damage is already done. Now, if this blade is so dangerous, how about putting a chainsaw blade on an angle grinder? It sounds risky and it seems risky. I think it might be risky as well, but then I'm simply going to give it a try and give my opinion about it.
As you can see, the package is not very impressive, and as I was opening it, I was only hoping for all of the parts to be in there, and guess what? I was not disappointed there. It had all the necessary components and the hardware and even a tool to assemble it. The package did not have an instruction manual, but it did have this pamphlet with pictures on it. It shows you how to assemble the unit. That's quite helpful. The gear for the chain has a groove which sits flush on the bolt of the angle grinder. This is followed by one of the flange nuts that we usually use on the angle grinder. Now, this nut is not a part of the kit, it's a part of the angle grinder itself. Then we've got to fit the main clamp or support or whatever it is called onto the grinder. This piece again has a groove which matches with the groove on the grinder, which gives better grip and support. There's a slot on the clamp which is for the chain tensioner. You can simply place the bolt of the chain tensioner into that slot. Then we can place the chain guide bar on top. Guess what? I had to Google for that name. So we can place it on top and temporarily tighten the two bolts and lock it in place. Then we can place the chain loosely on top onto the gear. This is a little bit of a fiddly thing here. This bolt has to go on top of this red colored guard. So once the chain is placed even loosely, we can remove the bolts and insert it through the guard and hand tighten it. Now we can turn it around and adjust the tension on the chain before finally tightening all the other bolts. Now we can fit the handle and the front hand guard. Now note that this is not a chain brake, so be mindful of that. The most crucial part of any chainsaw is the oil. There's a tiny hole here and an oil can is provided. I filled this oil can with engine oil and I'm trying to pour some oil in through that hole, but I saw that the oil was not getting on the entire chain, so I kind of put oil on the entire chain. Now it's ready, I guess, so let's take this guy for a feast.
The whole point of having a chainsaw, or at least this particular gadget here for now, is to be able to cut wood logs that are at least 6 inches in diameter. Anything smaller than that could be cut using a regular handsaw. Trust me, it is quite effective that way. Now let's see if it can do what I want it to do.
This footage is running in real time. This log is probably 6 inches in diameter. You can see that I'm not forcing the machine too much and it is cutting loosely and freely. My camera went out of focus on the first shot, so I'm making this small slice of log for now. I tried carving and I guess my skills are not that adequate, but the machine did well.
Does this work? You saw the video, you be the judge. But let's tackle the next obvious question. Is it dangerous? My answer is yes, and most power tools are if you don't understand their limitations. And in this case, we are rigging one power tool to do the function of another, so the risk factor is also going up a little bit. But if you understand the limitations of your machine, if you know how to handle it, I think you can still get away with it and use it without causing any damage to yourself or to your workpiece. Let us talk about a few pros and cons of this chainsaw attachment for this angle grinder. Now, you cannot simply change the attachment like you would change any other angle grinder attachment. It takes a little bit of a time to put this all together, and when you take it off, there are quite some parts. You will have to keep all those parts safely for the next use, otherwise it is not going to work properly. It could be a little dangerous. So yes, it's going to take a little bit of a time to assemble this entire attachment, and when you want to replace it with your regular attachment, you will have to make sure that you reserve all of the parts and keep it safe. And the next important question is, do we get a replacement for the parts? For the chain, yes, we get a replacement. It says here it is 11.5 inches chain, and you get the chain separately, and I'm not really sure about all the other components. Handling. Now let's talk about the handling. You have to be careful all the time when you're handling one of these guys. Now if you look at this handle here, it is attached with simple screws here, and by any chance if you're going to be leaning forward or if you jerk a little bit, I am sure your hand is going to get in contact with the chain, and then there is going to be no biometrics for you for quite some time, I guess. So that is one important thing. And this guy has to be oiled all the time after a certain amount of use. So there is a small hole given here for the oil, but I do put the oil all around the chain so that it runs smoothly, and that's the case with most other chainsaw as well. You'll always have to keep oiling the machine so that it works smoothly. Overall, I would say this is a good buy, particularly in my situation, because I would not be needing a chainsaw quite often. I need a chainsaw only for a few jobs. So rather than buying an entire machine, I think this attachment would be good enough. And I've been using an angle grinder for quite some time, and I understand the limitations of this angle grinder. This particular angle grinder does not have a trigger mechanism. Even I thought of even attaching an external adapter or something like that, but as it is cumbersome. I don't want to make it more complicated. So as long as we are careful while handling this machine, respect the limitations of the machine, I think we should be able to get this to work. With that said, I will see you in my next video. Until then, bye bye.